March 9, 1945. Midnight. Tokyo, Japan. Air raid sirens wailed across the city. Not unusual. American B-29 bombers had been hitting Japan for months. High-altitude raids, precision bombing. People went to shelters as a precaution, but most weren't too worried. Then the first incendiary bombs fell. Not high explosive, fire bombs. Thousands of them. Small cylinders packed with napalm gel that splattered burning petroleum across entire city blocks. Within minutes, hundreds of fires merged into dozens of larger fires. Within an hour, those merged into a firestorm, a self-sustaining inferno that created its own weather. Winds of hurricane force sucked oxygen into the flames. The temperature reached 1,800 degrees, hot enough to melt glass. Boil water in the canals, ignite people through spontaneous combustion. By dawn, 16 square miles of Tokyo had burned to ash. Over 100,000 people were dead. 1 million were homeless. The deadliest air raid in human history. More people killed in 6 hours than died instantly from the atomic bomb at Nagasaki. And most Americans have never heard of it. This is the story of Operation Meetinghouse, the night Tokyo burned. Tokyo, in 1945, was the most densely populated city on Earth. 7 million people packed into narrow neighborhoods. Most buildings were wood and paper construction. Traditional Japanese homes. Beautiful, historic, and incredibly flammable. American war planners knew this. They'd studied Japanese cities for years, analyzed building materials, population density, fire department capabilities. They built exact replicas of Japanese neighborhoods in the Utah desert and burned them to test different incendiary mixtures. The conclusion was clear. Japanese cities would burn, easily, completely. A few hundred bombers with incendiary bombs could destroy an entire city in one night. But there was debate about whether to do it. Precision bombing doctrine said you hit military and industrial targets, not cities full of civilians. High-altitude bombing with high-explosive bombs. That was the American way of war. The problem was, it wasn't working. B-29s flying at 30,000 feet couldn't hit anything in Japan. High winds at altitude scattered their bombs. Cloud cover obscured targets. Bombing accuracy was terrible. Japanese war production continued unaffected. General Curtis LeMay took command of Base 1 Bomber Command in January 1945. He looked at the results and made a radical decision. Strip the defensive guns off the B-29s to save weight. Load them with incendiary bombs. Fly at night at low altitude. 5,000 feet instead of 30,000. Burn Japanese cities to the ground. His staff thought he was insane. Flying low made the bombers vulnerable to fighters and flak. Removing defensive guns left them defenseless. It was suicide. LeMay disagreed. Japanese night fighters were ineffective. Most flak guns couldn't track targets at night. The bombers would be safer at low altitude than high. And the increased bomb load would devastate Japanese cities. He picked Tokyo for the first test, the largest target. The capital, home to crucial war industries mixed in with residential areas. Destroy Tokyo, and you strike at the heart of Japan's ability to wage war. LeMay's plan was unlike anything tried before. 334 B-29 bombers would attack Tokyo in a single night. They'd fly individually, not in formation. At 5,000 to 7,000 feet. Carrying nothing but incendiary bombs, over 2,000 tons of fire. The lead bombers would drop bombs in an X pattern across the target area. creating a perimeter of fire. Then, following bombers would fill in the X, saturate the entire area with incendiaries, create so many fires the fire departments couldn't respond, let them merge into a firestorm. The target area was the most densely populated district in Tokyo. Over 100,000 people per square mile. Wood and paper buildings, narrow streets, few fire breaks. Perfect conditions for a firestorm. LeMay knew what he was ordering. This wasn't precision bombing of military targets. This was burning an entire district of Tokyo. Civilian casualties would be massive. He'd be killing women, children, elderly. Thousands of them. Years later, LeMay said if America had lost the war, he'd have been tried as a war criminal. But America was going to win. And he believed burning Japanese cities would shorten the war, save American lives by forcing Japan to surrender. On the night of March 9, the B-29s took off from bases in the Mariana Islands. Tinian, Saipan, Guam. They flew north through the darkness, crews nervous. This was different from high-altitude raids. They'd be low enough to see faces, see people running, see what their bombs did. The first Pathfinder aircraft arrived over Tokyo just after midnight. They dropped their incendiaries in an X pattern. Fires bloomed across the target district. The main force followed. The bombers came in waves, one after another, flying through smoke so thick it obscured the ground. The smell of burning wood and flesh rose 30,000 feet. Crews could smell Tokyo burning from miles away. At 5,000 feet, the B-29s were close enough to see streets, buildings, people. Some crews reported seeing people running, trying to escape the flames. There was nowhere to go. Fire surrounded entire neighborhoods. The incendiary bombs worked exactly as designed. Each bomb cluster contained dozens of smaller bomblets. They scattered across rooftops, streets, parks, burst into flame on contact. Napalm gel stuck to everything it touched. Water made it burn hotter. Within 20 minutes of the first bombs falling, fires were merging. Small fires combined into larger fires. Larger fires combined into conflagrations. The heat created updrafts that sucked in surrounding air. Wind speeds increased. 50 miles per hour. 70. Hurricane-force winds feeding the flames. A firestorm had formed. Self-sustaining, unstoppable. The fire created its own weather system. Superheated air rose. Cool air rushed in from all sides, creating winds that fanned the flames even hotter. The temperature in the fire zone reached 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Steel melted. Glass melted. Stone cracked from thermal stress. Water in canals boiled. People caught in the open ignited from radiant heat before the flames even reached them. B-29 crews flying through the firestorm felt the heat inside their aircraft. Updrafts tossed the heavy bombers around like toys. Some planes were flipped upside down by the thermals. Others gained or lost 1,000 feet of altitude in seconds. And the bombing continued. For 2.5 hours, B-29s dropped incendiaries into the inferno, adding fuel to a fire that no longer needed fuel. It was feeding on Tokyo itself. On the ground, Tokyo became hell. The firestorm created winds so powerful they tore roofs off buildings, picked up burning debris and hurled it blocks away, started new fires faster than anyone could react. People tried to flee, but the fire moved faster than they could run. It jumped streets, leaped canals, surrounded entire neighborhoods in minutes. Families ran toward areas they thought were safe, only to find fire already there. Thousands crowded into parks and open spaces. But the radiant heat was so intense that even in open areas, people caught fire. Their clothes ignited, their hair, their skin. Some tried to shelter in concrete buildings, but the buildings became ovens. The heat inside killed everyone. Others jumped into canals and rivers, but the water boiled. Or they drowned when others jumped on top of them, trying to escape the flames. The firestorm lasted 6 hours, from midnight until dawn. When the sun rose, 16 square miles of Tokyo had been reduced to ash. Every building destroyed, every street scorched. Nothing left but rubble and bodies. The death toll was staggering. Over 100,000 people killed in one night. Some burned to death. Others suffocated when the fire consumed all oxygen. Others crushed in the panicked crowds. Bodies piled up in streets, canals, parks. So many the authorities couldn't count them all. 1 million people were homeless. The survivors wandered through ruins looking for family members. Most never found them. The heat had been so intense it vaporized human remains, left nothing but shadows on concrete. It was the deadliest air raid in human history, more destructive than the Great Fire of London, more than the Hamburg firestorm, more than any other bombing raid before or since. And it worked. Japanese war production in Tokyo was devastated. Thousands of small factories that made parts for aircraft and weapons were destroyed. The psychological impact was enormous. If Tokyo could burn, any city could burn. The B-29s that attacked Tokyo lost 14 aircraft, less than 5%, far lower casualties than high-altitude raids. LeMay's gamble had worked tactically. Low-altitude night bombing was safer and more effective than daylight precision bombing. But the human cost was enormous. Conservative estimates put the death toll at 100,000. Some historians believe it was higher, perhaps 120,000 or more. More people died in Tokyo on March 9 than died instantly from either atomic bomb. The distinction mattered. Atomic bombs were new, terrifying. A single bomb that destroyed an entire city. That got attention. But conventional bombing could be just as deadly. Just required more bombers and more bombs. LeMay didn't stop with Tokyo. He ordered similar raids on other Japanese cities. Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe, Yokohama. Night after night, B-29s burned Japanese cities. By summer of 1945, over 60 cities had been partially or completely destroyed. Japanese civilian casualties from firebombing exceeded 300,000 killed. Millions more homeless. Industrial production collapsed. Transportation networks were destroyed. Food distribution broke down. Japan was being systematically burned into submission. The firebombing campaign remains controversial. Critics argue it was unnecessary. That Japan was already defeated. That killing hundreds of thousands of civilians was a war crime, regardless of justification. Defenders argue it shortened the war. That Japanese military production depended on thousands of small workshops in residential areas. That there was no way to separate military and civilian targets. That the alternative was invasion of Japan, which would have cost millions of lives on both sides. LeMay himself never expressed regret. He believed he'd done what was necessary to win the war and save American lives. Whether that justifies burning cities full of civilians remains debated to this day. The March 9 raid on Tokyo marked a turning point. Before, Japanese leaders believed they could endure American bombing, repair the damage, continue fighting. After Tokyo burned, that belief died. Emperor Hirohito toured the burned districts. He saw the devastation firsthand. Miles of ash, homeless survivors, the smell of death. He began pushing for peace negotiations. But hardliners in the military refused. They wanted to fight to the bitter end. The firebombing continued through spring and summer. More cities burned. Japanese air defenses were overwhelmed. Fighter units had no fuel. Pilots had minimal training. Anti-aircraft ammunition was running out. The B-29s bombed with near impunity. By August, LeMay was running out of targets. Most major cities had already been burned. He was hitting smaller cities, towns, industrial areas, anywhere that might support the war effort. Then came Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bombs. Japan surrendered, but historians debate whether the atomic bombs or the firebombing campaign was more decisive. The fire raids had already destroyed most of Japan's war-making capacity. The atomic bombs were psychologically devastating, but militarily, they just continued what conventional bombing had already accomplished. What's certain is the Tokyo firebombing worked. It destroyed Japanese industrial capacity. It broke civilian morale. It proved American air power could devastate Japan without invasion. Whether the cost in civilian lives was justified remains one of the great moral questions of the war. Today, most Americans know about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The atomic bombs are taught in every history class, remembered every August, part of our national memory of World War II. But Tokyo? The firebombing that killed more people than Nagasaki? Most Americans have never heard of it. It's not taught in schools, not commemorated, not part of our collective memory. In Japan, the Tokyo firebombing is remembered. Memorials mark where districts once stood. Survivors told their stories. Museums document the horror. But even in Japan, the atomic bombs overshadow the conventional bombing campaign. Perhaps that's because atomic bombs were new, revolutionary. They changed warfare forever. Conventional bombing, no matter how deadly, was just an extension of tactics used throughout the war. Or perhaps it's because the Tokyo raid doesn't fit our narrative. Americans like to believe we fought World War II cleanly. Precision bombing of military targets, minimal civilian casualties. The good guys who fought with honor. The truth is more complicated. Strategic bombing killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. German cities were bombed. Japanese cities were burned. The line between military and civilian targets blurred until it disappeared. One night of firebombing killed more people than the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki. Over 100,000 dead in 6 hours. The deadliest air raid in human history. And it's been largely forgotten. That's the legacy of Operation Meetinghouse. A raid so devastating it helped end the war. So controversial it's been erased from popular memory. The night 300 B-29 bombers turned Tokyo into an inferno and changed the face of warfare forever.